Ever feel like you're just drowning in information, really wishing someone could just, pull out the important stuff for you?
Yeah, that feeling of overwhelm is real.
Exactly. And that's what we try to do here with the deep dive. We take sources that grab your attention, things you're curious about, and we really try to distill the core insights just for you.
And today, the source material you brought forward is Israel Regardie's The Middle Pillar. It seems like you're interested in self-development, maybe magic, mysticism, or that fascinating intersection of psychology and spirituality.
Definitely. And this book, The Middle Pillar, it really feels like a key piece in that puzzle. When you think about it being published way back in 1938,
Yeah.
it was incredibly forward-thinking. I mean, he wasn't just talking about ceremonial magic in some vague way.
No.
He was actually given step-by-step practical exercises. That was pretty unusual for the time, wasn't it?
Hugely unusual. Most magical knowledge back then was, well, kept pretty secret, passed down through initiates. So Regardie putting practical instructions out there was quite something. But even more radical, maybe, was his attempt to connect it all to psychoanalysis, which was still a relatively new field itself.
Okay, yeah, that connection is fascinating. How did he actually see magic and psychology fitting together?
Well, his fundamental idea was that both are essentially studying the human mind, just maybe from different angles. He actually suggested that techniques like the lesser banishing ritual or the middle pillar exercise itself could potentially be useful for psychotherapists in a clinical setting.
Wow, okay. That is radical for the 30s.
Absolutely.
Yes.
He really wanted to break down those walls, between ancient wisdom and modern psychology. He saw them both as tools for understanding ourselves, for transformation.
And it seems like that central practice, the middle pillar exercise, it's had a really lasting impact, hasn't it?
It really has. It's become almost a standard technique in certain self-development circles.
Right.
You sometimes even find versions of it, maybe simplified or adapted, in like New Age self-help books.
Without even mentioning Regardie.
Often, yeah. Without tracing it back to its roots in the Golden Dawn tradition or crediting Regardie for popularizing it and explaining it so clearly.
That just speaks to the power of the technique itself, I guess.
And to Regardie's clarity as a writer and teacher. He really knew his stuff and wanted to share it. It's a big part of his legacy.
So before we really dive deep into the exercise itself, what it feels like, what it does, maybe we should get a sense of the person behind it. What shaped Regardie's thinking, his background?
Understanding his journey is key. His early life was quite formative. He moved to Washington, D.C. when he was 13 and pretty quickly got interested in theosophy.
Madame Blavatsky and all that.
Exactly. And also Hindu philosophy, yoga, who was soaking it all up. Apparently, by the time he was 16, the Library of Congress was like his second home.
Huh, I love that image.
And crucially, while he was there, he found someone to teach him Hebrew.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and becoming fluent in Hebrew was incredibly important for his later studies in Kabbalah, which is so central to his magical system.
The Library of Congress leading to Kabbalah studies. That's quite a path.
Yeah.
But wasn't he initially interested in art?
He was, yeah. He actually went to art school in Philadelphia for a bit.
Okay.
But then, in 1926, he read Aleister Crowley's Book 4. And that was it.
That was the turning point.
Completely. It just sparked this intense, lifelong passion for magic and mysticism. He realized art wasn't his main path. So he started writing to Crowley, who was in Paris then.
Right.
And eventually, he managed to get hold of Crowley's magazine, The Equinox, the whole set.
And that led to him actually working with Crowley. That sounds intense.
Intense is probably the word. In 1928, he was only 20. He moves to Paris to be Crowley's secretary.
20? Wow.
Yeah. And for the next 3 years, he's living this really unconventional life, hoping to learn magic directly from the man himself.
Did he?
Well, it wasn't straightforward. Crowley was becoming more and more notorious. The French police thought he might be a spy because of some German connections. Yeah. And then his literary agent accused him of drug use publicly. It all kind of blew up. Crowley got kicked out of France.
And Regardie?
Regardie didn't have the right papers, so he had to leave too. It was all pretty chaotic.
Man, what a start. So where did he go from there?
He ended up back in England after a bit, briefly rejoining Crowley. But Crowley was basically persona non grata by then, the wickedest man in the world. Couldn't get published.
Right.
Couldn't afford to keep Regardie on as secretary anymore. They stayed friends for a while, even wrote a book together, trying to fix Crowley's reputation.
The Legend of Aleister Crowley.
That's the one.
Yeah.
But eventually their paths kind of split. Regardie got a job working as a secretary for Thomas Burke, the novelist, in London.
But even with all that drama, he was starting his own writing career.
He was. 1932 was a huge year for him. He published A Garden of Pomegranates, which was all about his Kabbalah studies,
Okay.
and The Tree of Life, which many people consider his magnum opus, really. A massive work on practical magic based on Golden Dawn teachings.
And he dedicated that one to Crowley.
He did, yeah, though under a pseudonym, Marstus. Shows there was still respect there at that point.
But that relationship didn't end well, did it?
No, sadly. Around 1937, Regardie sent Crowley a copy of The Tree of Life, friendly note inside. Crowley's reply was, well, pretty awful. He used an anti-Semitic slur against Regardie, related to his adopted name, Francis.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Regardie, understandably, was furious, fired back an angry letter. Crowley then spread some nasty rumors about Regardie. And that was basically the end of their relationship.
That's rough.
It is. But what's remarkable is that years later, Regardie seemed to have found a way to forgive him. His 1970 book, The Eye in the Triangle, about Crowley, shows a lot of understanding.
That speaks volumes about Regardie himself. What a complex life. And his work clearly lived on after he passed away in '85.
Absolutely. His books are still hugely influential, and The Middle Pillar specifically is just so important for how it framed magic psychologically. Its whole purpose was to give a kind of rationale for these techniques, comparing their effects to what psychoanalysts were observing.
Okay, so let's get into the heart of The Middle Pillar now.
Yeah.
What are the actual practical exercises he lays out in the book, the things our listener might explore?
He gives really clear instructions for a few key practices. There's the Kabbalistic cross, which is sort of a basic alignment technique.
Okay.
Then the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, the LBRP, which is for clearing space mentally and energetically.
A classic.
Definitely. And then, of course, the middle pillar exercise itself, which is the main focus.
And there are other methods, too.
Yeah, he talks about things like circulating the light, moving the energy you build up, using the vibratory formula to properly intone divine names.
Right, not just saying them, but vibrating them.
Exactly. And also techniques for consciously building the tree of life pattern within your own aura, your energy field.
And his whole point was that understanding the psychology behind it was key, right? It wasn't just about doing rituals blindly.
Precisely. He argued that ancient cultures, particularly in the East, already had really sophisticated psychologies built into their spiritual systems.
Like yoga and magic.
Like yoga and magic, yeah. He even mentions books from the time, like Geraldine Koster's Yoga and Western Psychology, that were trying to make those connections. He saw himself as part of that effort.
So in his view, what did magic offer that maybe Western psychology at the time was missing?
He felt magic really engaged the creative, intuitive parts of us. Psychology was maybe more focused on the analytical side.
Okay.
Regardie thought magic gave you actual techniques to access deeper parts of your unconscious, aiming for real self-knowledge. What he called realizing your true divine nature.
Like the potential seen in figures like Buddha or Jesus.
Exactly. Those were his examples of people who achieved that realization. He saw magic as a way to systematize the path towards that, almost like an exact science, based on discovering that divinity within yourself. He believed it offered real value and fulfillment to anyone willing to put in the work.
One phrase that really jumped out at me was the conscious reconciliation of opposing forces. What did you mean by that, especially for someone practicing this, like our listener?
That's a really central concept. It's about developing inner integration, what some traditions call the golden flower.
Okay.
He looked at trinities in different religions, Osiris, Isis, Horus in Egypt, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, or in Kabbalah, Cheesed, Gevurah, Tifereth.
Mercy, severity, beauty.
Right. He saw these not just as religious ideas, but as psychological facts, forces within all of us.
So they're like blueprints for our inner landscape. How does that help the listener?
Pretty much. He connects Cheese, mercy, expansion, like Jupiter, and Gevurah, severity, or might, limitation, like Mars, as the two pillars of the temple. They represent the fundamental opposites we deal with. Spirit, matter, love, hate, expansion, contraction, all that stuff.
The poles?
Exactly. And then Tifereth, beauty, equilibrium, linked to the sun, is the reconciler, the balance point, the middle way.
Ah, hence the middle pillar.
Precisely. It's the path to self-mastery, awakening that imprisoned soul, the divine spark. It connects to ancient initiations urging you to develop the sun within, that balanced self that avoids extremes. For the listener, understanding this helps reframe inner conflicts. They're not just problems, they're energies to be balanced.
That's a much more dynamic way to see it. And he talked about how not reconciling these forces, these internal conflicts, can actually cause problems, right? Physically and mentally.
Absolutely. He believed unresolved conflict leads to dissociation, fragmentation, which can then show up as physical issues or nervous disorders.
So what was his approach to dealing with that?
It's a process. First, you have to actually recognize the conflict, then analyze it, then, crucially, accept it's there.
No denial?
No denial. Denial just pushes it deeper. Then he suggested recalling childhood memories connected to the conflict, but doing it without shame or guilt.
Easier said than done sometimes.
For sure. But the idea is to look at those old experiences with your adult understanding, to kind of diffuse the old emotional charge, link mind and emotion.
So you're not just swinging between opposites unconsciously.
Right. Because denying any part of yourself leads to that fragmentation. He even linked this to Buddhist meditation, like samasati.
The mindfulness of memory.
Yeah, examining memories to release the energy tied up in them, those knots of unconscious tension, the resistances to life flow.
And seeing how past conflicts show up now, like neurosis being a kind of maladaptation.
Exactly, understanding the roots. But the first step is always that unconditional acceptance of the conflict. That's the opposite of the escape mechanism people often fall into.
Acing it takes away its power.
It takes away the crippling fear. It gives you courage to actually deal with things. He even used the example of constipation.
Seriously?
Yeah, suggesting it could sometimes be a physical symptom of inner conflict blocking energy flow. Sometimes illness itself forces us to look deeper.
And honest self-knowledge, through meditation or analysis, can lead to healing.
That was his belief. And a big part of that is eliminating fear. Pathological fear, not healthy caution. He quotes that magical saying, "Fear is failure. Fear freezes you."
So, bringing it back to the listener, how did he see magic and analytical psychology working together in this process of self-understanding?
He called psychology the spouse of the ancient system of magic, a partner.
Oh, okay, I like that.
He saw psychology as providing a really valuable framework for understanding the self, the conscious, the unconscious,
Yeah.
useful for anyone, but especially for students of magic or mysticism.
Why, especially for them?
To keep them grounded, basically, to prevent delusions about how spiritually advanced they were or what magic could realistically do overnight.
Right. Avoid spiritual bypassing.
Exactly. Analysis could reveal if someone was drawn to magic just to escape their real-world problems. Encourages a more mature approach.
And he actually compared specific psychological models, Freud's and Jung's, to the Kabbalah, didn't he?
He did. He talked about Freud's aid, the instinctual unconscious, and related to the highest sphere on the Kabbalistic middle pillar. He also acknowledged the weird terminology in magic, all the Hebrew words.
Yeah. Why is that?
Well, his point was that English often just doesn't have words with the same deep, layered, traditional meaning, the right psychological or spiritual resonance. His goal was to show the parallels, though, to correlate Kabbalah and psychology.
And what about Jung? How did Jung's ideas fit in for Regardie? That seems like a more natural fit, maybe?
There were definitely strong resonances there. He discussed Jung's idea of libido, not just sex drive, but as psychic energy, life force.
Okay.
And Jung's four functions, thinking, feeling, sensation, intuition. Plus the big one, the collective unconscious.
Right, the shared archetypes.
Exactly. Regardie saw that as very similar to concepts like the anima mundi, the world soul, in older traditions.
But he still felt the Kabbalah offered something more.
He did. He felt the tree of life, with its 10 Sephiroth on 3 pillars, was a more complex and complete map of consciousness than maybe the newer psychological models allowed for at the time.
So he drew parallels, but didn't equate them entirely.
Right. He linked Jung's Tao concept to the Kabbalistic Yechida, the highest soul aspect, the divine spark,
Okay.
and Jung's anima and animus.
The inner, feminine, and masculine?
Yeah. He connected those to Neshama, understanding love, and Shea, life force, on the tree.
Interesting.
He described the Ruach, the conscious ego in Kabbalah, the middle Sephiroth, as similar to Jung's persona, the mask we wear, an aggregate of functions potentially unstable, shaped by childhood.
Right.
He also brought in the Buddhist idea that the essence of mind is intrinsically pure, relating it to the deepest unconscious, countering the idea it's just a trash heap of negativity.
And only becomes explosive if you repress it.
That was his take, yeah. He talked about psychological resistance, prejudices, biases as the mind which slays reality.
Right.
And he quoted Jung about the unconscious holding wisdom consciousness can't access, creating perspective combinations, new solutions. He saw the tree of life's top sephira, Kether, as that archetypal world, the primordial unconscious, like Hindu turiya or ecstasy.
Okay, that's a really rich theoretical background. So now, finally, let's get practical. The middle pillar exercise itself, how does someone like our listener actually do it?
Right. So initially, you focus just on that central pillar of the tree of life.
Mm.
Kether above the head, Dath at the throat, Tifereth at the heart, Yesod at the genitals, Malkuth at the feet.
Just those 5 points down the center.
To start with, yes.
Mm.
As you get better with visualization, more sensitive to the energy, you can extend it later to include the side pillars, mercy, and severity. It's progressive.
Okay.
The idea is that as you awaken this divine power, this light from your higher self, your practice becomes a real magical engine for directing energy and consciousness.
And you often start with the Kabbalistic cross, right? To kind of set the stage.
Exactly. It's a quick way to align yourself with that higher genius within. You touch your forehead, vibrating Atto, thou art.
Visualizing light coming down.
Right. Then touch the breast, vibrating Melkuth, the kingdom, seeing the light ground there. Left shoulder, Vegadula, and the glory.
Yeah.
Right shoulder, Vegabora, and the power.
Visualizing light extending outwards.
Yes. Then clasp hands at the chest, Leolam Amen, forever Amen, completing the cross of light. And the key is the vibration.
Finding that personal pitch that resonates.
Yes, feeling it in your body. It's not just saying the words.
Got it. So after the cross, you visualize the spheres of light down the middle pillar. Take us through that.
Okay. First, Kether, above the crown. Visualize a brilliant sphere of white light. Vibrate the name AHIH. This is your highest essence, the root of consciousness.
White light above the head. AHI.
Then bring awareness down to the nape of the neck, death, the link. Visualize a shimmering center of light there. Vibrate YHVH Alhim, Yehovah Elohim. This connects the higher self to the ego.
Nape of the neck. YHVH Elohim.
Next, down to the heart or solar plexus. Tifereth. Balance, harmony. Visualize a sphere of glowing golden light. Vibrate YHVH, Eloah Vidath. Yehovah Eloah Vidath.
Golden light at the heart. YHVH Viv Eloah Vidath.
Then down to the genital area. Yesod. Foundation life force. Visualize a sphere of violet or purple light. Vibrate Shaddai Al-Chai. Shaddai Al-Chai.
Purple light lower abdomen. Shaddai Al-Chai.
Finally, down to the feet. Malkuth. The physical body, the earth. Visualize a sphere blending earthy colors, citrine, olive, russet, black. Vibrate Adonai hearts, Adonai Haaretz.
Earthy sphere at the feet. 89 hearts. Okay. And what should the listener be feeling or aiming for while doing this?
The goal is to really feel a sense of radiant energy, vitality flowing through those centers. You might feel tingling, warmth. It varies. But the main outcome should be increased poise, calmness, mental quiet. Regardie suggested spending about 5 minutes on each sphere, really letting the visualization of vibration sink in.
And the underlying idea is connecting with your own inner divinity.
Exactly. The magical idea is that your higher genius is a microcosm of God in the universe. So all effective work aligns with that genius. The cross and middle pillar are ways to invoke it right at the start.
He also compared this to the chakra system, didn't he? What was the difference he pointed out?
Yeah, he emphasized that the middle pillar involves a conscious, deliberate descent of light from above down into the personality.
Whereas chakras are often seen as more inherent.
Kind of, yeah. The middle pillar is an active invocation. At first, it might just feel like increased energy, more power.
Right.
But with practice, it leads to deeper emotional calm, mental expansion, clarity.
And he saw practical uses too, like healing. How would that work?
He suggested you could use the middle pillar to tap into a powerful source of healing energy by vibrating the names. Then, using your will in visualization, you could direct that energy through your hands to someone else.
Interesting.
He also saw it as great preparation for deeper meditation or more complex magical rituals. It builds the necessary energy.
And the colors he mentioned for each sphere, how do they help?
Visualizing the specific colors, white for Kether, lavender blue for Dath, gold for Tifereth, purple for Yesod, earthy tones for Malkuth, help stimulate the particular energy of each center more strongly.
It adds another layer.
Exactly. And eventually you can expand to the side pillars, visualizing their Sephiroth, vibrating their names, seeing their colors too. Chokmah, Bina, Cheesed, Geburah, Netzach, Hod.
It sounds like it can get quite complex.
It can. He even describes advanced techniques like silent vibration with specific gestures that can lead to altered states, like feeling lifted into a diviner region.
But he warns against rushing into that.
Strongly. He stresses that trying advanced stuff without solid grounding from practices like the middle pillar can cause mental or even physical problems. The middle pillar is the foundation.
It seems like a really flexible practice, too. Did he suggest ways to adapt it?
Yeah, he mentioned integrating things like massage, also using symbolic visualizations within the spheres, like a flower opening or a flame to enhance the effect.
Personalizing it.
Right. And he pointed towards more complex systems, like the Golden Dawn's color scales and their musical links, the musical Kabbalah, linking colors, notes, Hebrew letters. Lots to explore there.
But always emphasizing the basics first.
Always. Relaxation, the LBRP, building that foundation before getting into deeper energy work or magical healing.
And on healing, he stressed the healer needs to be balanced themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He saw magical healing as focused intention, energy manipulation, almost like auto-hypnosis. But the healer has to be psychically clear to avoid taking on the patient's issues or projecting their own. He even outlined a simple middle pillar healing ritual for two people.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive on the middle pillar, what are the main takeaways for our listener?
I think first, just appreciating its historical importance. How Regardie really tried to bridge magic and psychology in a practical way, that was huge.
Making these esoteric ideas more accessible.
Exactly. And second, the middle pillar exercise itself. It's elegant, powerful, and genuinely useful for self-development, finding balance, boosting vitality, maybe even for healing work if someone's drawn to that.
It really highlights Regardie's belief in the lasting value of these ancient techniques for modern people looking for self-understanding and inner balance.
Definitely. This whole exploration hopefully gives you, the listener, a good starting point if you want to look deeper into Kabbalah or ceremonial magic or Jungian ideas and how they might actually apply in your own life.
It definitely leaves you thinking about that ongoing need to reconcile our inner world with the outer one. And maybe, just maybe, considering the power we all have to consciously work with our own inner light, how might these ideas resonate on your path? Something to ponder.